Have you ever wondered how the clothes you wear today came to be? How did our ancestors go from simple animal skins to the complex styles we see today? Our journey into the past begins with the earliest known examples of clothing. In those prehistoric times, our ancestors found themselves in a world filled with harsh elements. They needed to protect themselves from the biting cold, the searing heat, and everything in between. And so, they turned to the world around them for solutions. The first clothes were not designed for style or fashion, but for survival. Imagine, if you will, a prehistoric man draped in the skin of a large beast, the fur providing a layer of warmth against the chill. These animal skins and furs were the earliest forms of clothing. They were rough, rugged, and purely functional, but they were a starting point. Over time, these early humans began to recognize the value of different animal skins. Some were thicker and warmer, others were lighter and more suitable for warmer climates. This was the first step towards understanding materials and their specific properties, a crucial aspect of fashion as we know it today. But animal skins were not the only materials at their disposal. As our ancestors began to settle and form communities, they started experimenting with plant-based materials. They discovered that certain plants could be processed and transformed into fibers. These fibers could then be woven together to create textiles. From the simple act of weaving, a whole new world of possibilities opened up. Suddenly, clothing was not just about protection, it was about expression, identity, and culture. Different communities started to develop their unique styles, and the seeds of fashion as we know it started to sprout. Yet, these early clothes were still far from the styles we see today. They were simple, basic, and focused more on function than form, but they laid the groundwork for the evolution of fashion. As we can see, the journey of fashion started from a place of necessity, not style. So, when did clothing transition from purely functional to a form of expression? When did style come into play? Well, believe it or not, our fascination with style and fashion is not a product of modern times. It has roots that stretch back thousands of years into the past. Let's take a journey back in time to explore the emergence of fashion in ancient civilizations such as Egypt, Greece, and Rome. In ancient Egypt, fashion was far more than just a way to cover one's body. It was a strong reflection of status and power. The pharaohs and their queens wore linen so fine, it was nearly transparent, adorned with gold and precious gemstones. This was a clear display of their divine status. The Greeks, on the other hand, loved simplicity. They believed in the beauty of the human form, and their clothing mirrored this philosophy. Their garments, known as chitons, were often plain, but the way they draped and folded the fabric, now that was where the style came in. Then there were the Romans. They took fashion to a whole new level. For them, clothes were a billboard advertising their social rank. Senators wore tunics bordered with a purple stripe, while the emperor was entitled to wear an entirely purple toga. Yes, they took color coding quite seriously. In all these civilizations, the introduction of dyes and precious materials added another dimension to fashion. People began experimenting with colors, and the rich, the powerful, and the brave donned vivid hues to set themselves apart. Clothing was no longer just about protection from the elements. It was about personal expression, about standing out in the crowd. It was about style. And so, from the banks of the Nile to the heart of Rome, through the use of different fabrics, colors, and designs, the ancients laid the foundation for what we know as fashion today. They taught us that what we wear can be an art form, a form of self-expression, a statement of our identity. Fashion, as we know it today, was born out of the desire to stand out and express individuality. But how did we get from togas and tunics to trousers and tuxedos? This question takes us on a journey back to the Middle Ages, a time when clothing began to shift from simply functional to a medium of self-expression and status. As society started to stratify, so did the clothes people wore. The nobility adorned themselves in velvets and furs, while the common folk dressed in simpler fabrics. But it was not just the societal norms that influenced fashion. The opening of trade routes, especially the Silk Road, brought in a flood of new materials, patterns, and ideas. Silk, spices, and other exotic goods traveled from Far East, inspiring a new wave of luxurious and intricate designs. Fashion started to take flight, much like the precious cargo on these trade routes. Then came the Renaissance, a period of rebirth and enlightenment that brought a revolution in every field. including fashion. The clothing of the time mirrored the era's emphasis on individuality and humanism. There was a shift from the rigid, structured garments of the Middle Ages to more flowing, form-fitting clothes. The invention of the sewing machine in the mid-19th century only accelerated this trend, making it possible for fashion to keep pace with the rapidly changing societal norms. Throughout this period, there were key fashion innovations that left a lasting impact. Take the ruff, for instance, a high pleated collar that was a status symbol in the 16th century, or the farthingale, a hooped skirt that epitomized the extravagant fashion of the Elizabethan era. Each trend, each innovation was a reflection of the times, a testament to the human desire for beauty and individuality. But it wasn't just about beauty. Fashion was and continues to be a tool for communication. It tells a story about who we are, where we come from, and where we aspire to go. It is a canvas upon which we paint our identities, our values, and our dreams. Fashion is a mirror of society, reflecting the values, aspirations, and technologies of the times. And as we continue on this journey, remember, the clothes we wear are more than just fabric and thread. They are a story, a history, a statement. As we entered the modern era, how did fashion continue to evolve? The 20th century brought with it profound changes, and fashion was no exception. Industrialization and mass production revolutionized the way we dressed. Clothing was no longer a luxury exclusive to the upper echelons of society, but became accessible to the masses. The sewing machine, the assembly line, and the advent of synthetic fibers transformed fashion into a thriving industry. This era also marked the emergence of fashion designers who became household names. Gabrielle Coco Chanel, Christian Dior, and Yves Saint Laurent, to name a few, began to dictate style rather than merely reflecting it. Their designs, showcased on the world's most prestigious runways, set the tone for what was considered en vogue. The 20th century was characterized by a medley of fashion trends and movements, each marking a distinct period within the century. The Roaring Twenties saw the rise of flapper dresses, with their dropped waists and shorter hemlines, symbolizing a break from the restrictive Victorian era. As we moved into the 40s and 50s, the power suit emerged, embodying the increasing role of women in the workplace. The tailored suit became a symbol of strength, authority, and sophistication. Then came the late 20th century, where streetwear started to infiltrate mainstream fashion. Inspired by hip-hop culture and skateboarding communities, streetwear was about comfort, functionality, and most importantly, individuality. Brands like Supreme and Stussy began as niche labels, but soon became global phenomena, further blurring the line between high fashion and street style. In the modern era, fashion became more than just clothing. It evolved into an industry, a form of art, and a way for us all to express our unique identities. It's a reflection of our times, our cultures, and our individual spirits. It's a language spoken by everyone, yet understood differently by each of us. In the modern era, fashion became an industry, a form of art, and a way for us all to express our unique identities. So, where are we headed? What does the future of fashion look like? As we stand at the precipice of a new era, the fashion industry is being swept up in a whirlwind of change. Current trends are veering towards sustainability, technology integration, and inclusivity, all of which are reshaping the landscape of fashion as we know it. Sustainability, for one, is no longer a buzzword, but a necessity. The fashion industry is taking note of its environmental footprint and making strides to reduce it. Designers are using recycled materials, consumers are embracing second-hand clothes, and brands are investing in circular fashion models. In the future, we can expect sustainability to be the norm, not the exception. Then there's technology. From 3D printed garments to smart textiles that can change color or temperature based on the wearer's needs, the integration of technology in fashion is pushing the boundaries of what's possible. As we look to the future, we can imagine a world where our clothes are not just wearable, but interactive and responsive. Inclusivity is another trend shaping the future of fashion. The industry is slowly but surely becoming more diverse, with brands embracing models of all sizes, races, and gender identities. This move towards inclusivity is not just about representation, it's about democratizing fashion and making it accessible to all. Global events too have a role to play in shaping the future of fashion. The pandemic, for instance, has accelerated the shift towards comfortable and functional clothing, a trend that's likely to continue in the post-pandemic world. But as we look to the future, it's important to remember that fashion, like everything else, is cyclical. Trends come and go, but the essence of fashion, its ability to express identity, to challenge norms, and to reflect societal changes, remains. Fashion, like humanity, is always evolving. It reflects our past, represents our present, and anticipates our future. As we move forward, let's embrace the changes and look forward to a future of fashion that's sustainable, inclusive, and technologically advanced.